Sound design.
Well, no, he showed up at the Commodore Ballroom, and I put it in line during sound check, and I went, oh, great, just take my money now. It made a profile, which we all know how a profile sounds, all of a sudden sound like no other profile I've ever heard before.
Sound design. Sound Design Live is produced independently by me, Nathan Lively, in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thanks.
All right, Sean, so what are you doing in Minneapolis?
3-night stand, Brandi Carlile, State Theater, sold out, not a seat left in the house.
What? How are you going to get me in?
I already took care of you, man.
Squeeze me in.
I got some pull.
Right.
3 nights. Last night was interesting because we did a broadcast mix.
Okay.
Which it's really cool because the band has kind of entrusted me at this point to just send a mix from front of house. So when we did Austin City Limits about 2 months ago, they were like, with a mobile truck there, I mean, we have the capabilities of doing a full split or a stems or whatever they want. And the band just was like, you know what, we like the way your board tapes sound. Just send that to the radio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, 3 nights here.
That means there must be quite a bit of Brandi Carlile fans in Minneapolis.
Yeah, we're doing well everywhere. It's amazing. When I started with them about just over 3 years ago, I'd known about the band. I'd known they had a really good following, but just in the last 3 years, it's been amazing. The tour we're on now is for the record, By the Way I Forgive You.
I saw your eyes behind your hair, and you're looking tired, but you don't look scared. Let 'em laugh while you can. Let 'em spin, let 'em scatter and win.
Which Dave Cobb produced and Shooter Jennings produced, and it's an amazing record. And we actually started rehearsals just over a year ago. And when I say by rehearsals, we started with the trio and the drummer in Brandi's living room.
Wow.
And myself. Just I had done the second half of the Firewatcher's Daughter tour, which was their last record, and then started with this one where they handed me this amazing piece of art, the record, and said, this is what we want the show to be like. So a lot of vintage effects, a lot of different things going on. None of the songs kind of sound the same, but there's a lot of the same vibes going on, including some of the older songs that have the way that they need to sound. So it's been great. We've been on this tour for a year now.
Wow.
I mean, the equipment hasn't been back to the Northwest since winter last year.
Okay. Any trouble with any of the equipment? Sending stuff back? Replacing things?
Bits and pieces here, wheels on cases, cables go bad, sub-snake lines you have to repair, just normal upkeep, stuff like that. Consoles, I like to wipe them, do a fresh OS on them every couple of months just so it doesn't build up. But I'm pretty particular, like when we have opening acts come in and they use our stuff, I like to make sure that their memory sticks get scanned on a computer outside to make sure there's no viruses or anything before.
Smart.
I own the console package and the mic package and pretty much the whole control package minus the monitor wedges. I've had the Profile for since its inception, so it's coming up on 10 or 12 years now. So I pretty much know how to maintain them, and actually a couple of the local companies back in Portland, Oregon, when I'm not on the road, they'll have me come in and freshen up their consoles, change out RAM and hard drives, and do wipes and stuff like that, because I've seen what can happen, when all of a sudden, someone puts in their memory stick and they're like, my show file's not there, and you're like, yeah, you hit a bad console somewhere along the way. So, yeah, as far as that, we had a mic go bad the other night. First night, yeah, we had a clip mic on the French horn. It looks like it got crimped on the cable, one of those little micro condensers.
Sure.
Yeah, no, we tend to baby our stuff really well, and the way we work is we kind of work, 2 to 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and we maintain stuff pretty well, so,
2 weeks off means you get to go back to
Go
Portland
home
for a little bit?
Yeah, everybody's kind of family based on this tour, so we're all kind of generally around the same age bracket.
Okay.
Late 30s, early 40s. We all kind of have young kids, so it's great, and it's the best touring experience I've ever had.
Wow.
And but no plans on ever going anywhere. Just as long as they'll have me, I'm here.
How'd you get the job?
I have a friend who worked at their booking agent company, and I had just finished a tour with KT Tunstall, who was in the same booking agent as these guys were. And when I found out that they were looking for a new front of house engineer, I got a phone call and I put my resume in, and the management company, Red Light, who I've worked for years with, many bands with them, put my resume in, and they said, yeah, he's a good candidate. But these guys are very personal. So they were like, can you come up to where they live outside Seattle? And I sat down with them. We actually we were just supposed to meet quickly, and we wound up sitting at a coffee shop for like 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Talking about music and just, theories and all that, and they went great. And then it was a different transition than any other tour I've kind of jumped onto. Most of the time you're replacing somebody. Mm-hmm. And it's maybe not a good or bad situation, but you're literally stepping into somebody else's shoes, where this one I kind of transitioned in. Their old front of house engineer was still there. So I came out with them for a week just to see if, 75% of touring is just not so much the skill that you have, it's can you get along with these people you're going to be in a bubble with a lot. And so I came out for like a week, and when I got the job, it was going to be front of house, and I'll be the production manager also, because I've had that experience with a lot of the other acts I've worked for. And we just came out, and I kind of PM'd a little bit and kind of figured out if I fit in the mold, and just lo and behold, it was great. After the first, they were on a 2-week Christmas run, acoustic trio. It's a funny story because we were on the East Coast, and it was in 2015, and I had a pretty busy year in 2015. I was still doing a lot of Robert Randolph stuff. I was working with Daryl Hall and John Oates as the front of house engineer, and I also did KT Tunstall, and I did Rich Robinson. And then when that all wrapped up, I went out as just one of the audio crew guys on the Florence and the Machine tour.
Oh, cool.
And loved it, and just wound up kind of running, and just, one of the crew guys, not so much a mixer or just help kind of get things in and facilitating things. And I was originally was like, hanging PA, running cable, running feeder, ground subs. And I loved it though, but I would dump the trucks and pack the trucks, and I loved it because after that point of just mixing, it was nice just to kind of be in that position.
Hold on a second. I think I just heard you say that you loaded and unloaded the trucks, and then right after that you said, I loved it. Was that a mistake?
I still pack the truck on Brandi Carlile. I still, as the production manager front of house, because I can usually get front of house done and down quick. The audio package is pretty well put together that we can get it boxed up rather quickly. So I have no problem. I love being in the truck. I love the Tetris of it all. I mean, when
you
you
were
work,
made for this job.
Yeah, and it just, I'm one of those guys. If I load our truck 2 times, I have the pack committed to memory. And I mean, I can literally just like yell, even the truck driver and the guy's like, no, that doesn't go there. And they're like, I've drawn a few maps for people now, and
sure.
I'm big on consistency. Let's just keep it the same, so we know how it goes.
So what I think was interesting about you getting this job is that you mentioned a resume, and you mentioned doing some proactive stuff to get the job. And I think most often we get jobs, it seems like it's just kind of out of the blue. Like someone recommends you, everything's kind of happening behind the scenes. Someone recommends you, and then you get the call, like, can you do this job, basically? Yeah, so this is interesting that you kind of applied in a way, and you said, hey, I want this job. Please consider me for this job. I think that's less common, right?
Yeah, most of the time it's like, hey, are you available? Can you fill in? Can you, okay, we're trying people out. I've been on a few gigs where we're going to try 3 different people, and whoever the band likes is going to be the one that happens. And when we did that Christmas tour, I came out, and I was only there for a week, and then my parents still live in Albany, New York, so we had a day off in Vermont, and we were just kind of hanging out, and I sort of rented a car, and I was going to drive back, and they're like, yeah, you know, it's going to be great. You know, I was going to start 2016, beginning of the year. We were going to do 2 New Year's Eve shows. Alex Gardner, the old engineer who I love, friends with to this day, worked with his father, Portland constantly, was going to transition out. I was going to transition in. And funny enough, I drove back from Burlington, Vermont, like 4 hours back to my mom and dad's house. And 2015 was so busy. Also in 2015, we had my son Harrison, my wife did, and first kid, he was at the time maybe 4 or 5 months old. So I was gonna, rest of the year, I'm done. Sure. I had been away for a while at that point, so I decided that, you know, I got back to my parents' house, I was gonna fly out the next morning, go back to Portland, celebrate the holidays, and then New Year's Eve, we would kick up. And lo and behold, I went home, had dinner with my parents, we were having a good time. I knew I had an early flight the next morning, and we got done with dinner, sat on the couch with my mom and dad, and the twins called me, and they're like, hey man, we got to tell you, we had a great time with you. You know, we think this is going to be a great fit. We had a good time. By the way, can you come back tomorrow and finish the run?
Oh, wow.
So I just remember calling my wife, and she was, but you know, my wife is a saint and my best friend and the best person in the world. She's like, you know, this is going to be good in the long run, so you should stay and do that. That year being when we were doing Hall & Oates, because they were East Coast based, a lot of the time I stayed on the East Coast at my mom and dad's house, so I could fly in and out and do those gigs. So I wasn't his home, and I apologize to Nicole now that as much as I could have been, but yeah, so that was
that's a tough thing to negotiate.
Yeah, but most
short term, long term.
Yeah, most of the time you're just like, hey, are you available? Can you do this? When can you get here? Can we try you out? You know, this was more like a job interview. Like, hey, we're gonna check with some people who you say you've worked with, and
it kind of makes sense because it's like we're gonna be together doing this for a year or more.
It was pretty proactive. I mean, most of the time when you're hired for a tour, you're hired for that leg of the tour.
Yeah, a few weeks, maybe a handful of months. Sean, you have done another interview recently with Larry over at Roadie Free Radio. It was a very good interview. You talked all about getting started, you know, a lot of your career. So I don't want to repeat that. And for anyone who wants to know all about your career and where you came from, they should go to listen to that interview. So we should just talk about technical stuff, because Larry doesn't know shit about being an engineer. I'm totally kidding.
But I do.
Larry's great.
I do love that, because selfishly, I've become pretty good friends with Larry, and I will always tip him off to people I think he should go get. This is not technical, because I love what he does, because it's the story of how you got there. Yeah. Listen, we all know in this industry, if you're a sound guy or lighting guy, we all know our jobs in some form or another. But how is your family life, being that you're this front of house engineer, or you're this drum tech, or you're whatever? And I love that. I want to know that, because if you just stay in the technical world the whole time, my whole thing in life as an audio engineer is, we all know the left brain, right thing. One side's artistic, one side's technical. And I always want to be 50-50. My favorite guys who do this stuff are exactly 50-50. They're wizards when it comes to the technical end, but also they're very artistic, where, you know, this reverb would sit well with this mix, you know, and the coloring of the sound of this would really work with this, where at the same time you're just like, well, that filter could be here, and this, you know, and I really love that balance, and it's a big part of who I am and what I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So technical, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the show that you're on now. I think that would be the most fun thing. Let's just focus on what you're doing now. It's like right present in front of your face, and let's just do things backwards, since I normally start things forward. Let's talk about the outputs and then work our way to the inputs. So tell me about the speakers you have. Oh, wait, are you carrying speakers with you? Okay, so everything is
the
in-house.
way this tour works is we carry a control package. We carry monitor wedges and amplifiers. We carry all the microphones. We carry all the sub-syncs. We carry a power distro. And we have a certain list on the rider of like 5 or 6 PA systems. Those are the ones we'd like to see. We all know when you're touring, a lot of times, you got all the major players, the ones that everybody wants. And I don't know, did we not say it on the air?
No,
brand names.
say anything.
So yeah, they're all the Meyer, D&B, L Acoustics, whatever the hotshot PA of the time is. But we all know that we're going to see a lot of Vertex, and like with this theater they had an XLC in it, and it all depends on budgetary constraints. And this is the production manager had of me going, okay, what can we afford, and what will the show budget allow? Some venues you go into and they're an empty shell, and they say, well, what do you want? And then you have to say, well, okay, we're in Arkansas, what's available? What are my options? And then you have to weigh out the price versus your budget. Okay, can I afford the D&B or the L Acoustic, or do I have to go with another brand that's maybe...
So how does that work? They say, here's what we have, and if you want something else...
You have to pay for it. Yeah, okay. And certain places, like, some places you just can't take their PA down. Or in some places you just have to pay to take the PA system down. So you have to always, being the production manager, keep in mind that it's like, I have to look at the bottom end of the budget, because if I just went out and said, get me what I want, get me what I want, get me what I want, all of a sudden at the end of the night at settlement, all this money's coming out of what eventually will go to the band.
Yeah. So how did that work out specifically here? You saw what they had.
I saw what they had.
That's not exactly what I want.
No, they have an XLC.
And we're not. Okay.
They have an old EV XLC rig, which I've used 1,000,001 times. The sound company I started with when I was a kid was an EV house, and I really know the stuff. And I went, yeah, I can have good shows on it. Cool. Most of the House of Blueses have it. Is it the Ferrari of PA systems? No, but it's, you can get a decent sound out of it. So, and we all know with Smart and a lot of the other system analyzation kind of software, you can kind of ballpark and get what you want out of it. It may take a little bit more work than some of the newer PAs. You get a D&B or an L Acoustic or a Meyer that's set up, and it loads your delay times, it puts your array correction and everything in it, and you just go, oh great, and you just 3 tweaks on your EQ and you're okay, done. Where some of the older ones you need to work at, but every once in a while you get like an old vintage PA, like an 850 rig, and all of a sudden you go, man, my snare drum never sounds this good, because it's that horn loaded mid-range, it's just tearing your face off. So output wise, the smartest thing I did was on the Experience Hendrix tour about 10 years ago. The first show I bought a Meyer Galileo. I want it, I bought it, and it's still one of the best pieces of gear.
Yeah, it's an investment.
Yeah, I love gear. I am a gear junkie. That's my vice. I have a house full of gear, and that's why I own the control package on this tour. I wanted my own console, and then once you have your own front of house console, you're like, no, if I own the monitor console, it might be easier. So now I have a monitor console, and it snowballs, microphones, cables, and then all of a sudden you have a B rig and you have backup of this and that. So the Galileo was a huge investment for me. I love it. Outputs, how I drive it is, when we get super nerdy and technical, it's driving off an Avid Profile at 4824.
So AES EBU into the
408, 4 in, 8 out. So I drive off of my matrix, off of the console. I drive 4 outputs. So there's a full stereo mix, left, right. There's a subwoofer or sub bass send, and then there's what I either call the front fill or center fill. So it's like a collapsed mono, which is tailored from the matrix via subgroups if I want to just send vocals, or if I want to just send vocals and guitars. But 70 to 80% of the time it's a full mix. And what it is, like I said, it's a summed of the left, right, and that'll go to the front fill send, under balconies, center fill if the room has a center fill. Because a lot of the nice theaters now are putting and a lot of the touring PAs are putting a center fill in, which I just love from my theater days, because you can drive the vocals kind of center and bring the focus, and then you can mix the bands out wide.
Yep.
And it just gives you so much width and more room to work with things in the mix.
How are you feeding that sub channel?
The sub matrix is aux 1 that drives a matrix, just so I have on the matrix output page, I have the 4 outputs. So left, right, sub, front fill, I call it, or center fill. And then I also have available 7 and 8 on that console, or a stereo record feed, which gets some audience mics matrixed into it. So I have a reference for the band if they want to hear anything. I have a pair of Telefunken M60 prototypes at an XY in front of house, and super nerdily through a Midas XL48 preamp AES into 2 channels. And then on stage I have a pair of Sennheiser shotguns coming back. And I kind of delay the mix to everything, so everything's kind of arriving properly. So I have a reference mix, and it usually drives through some sort of mastering plugin just to kind of sandwich it all together, so I can hand the band, if someone will call me up and they'll say, oh, we want to listen to this to work on it, or if a TV show wants to hear what's coming, and that 2 mix burns to 2 tracks on Pro Tools, a stereo mix on Pro Tools, and then also a redundant Tascam compact flash recorder at 4824.
Let's go back to the system XLC. So do you see a system design ahead of time, or you just walk into the room on the day and you look at the design and say, okay, that's going to work, or we're gonna have to take it down and change some things? How do you have any influence over?
Sometimes if the PA is being brought in, I'll try to come in the morning when they're hanging it. I systems engineer when I'm not on the road for audio companies in the Pacific Northwest, so I know the software, I know array calc and stuff like that, and I'll be like, and a lot of times when I'm advancing, I'll go, okay, can you send me your array calc file or your whatever program they're using, just so I can look at it and how it reacts to the room. But I mean, a room like this, the PA's hung, you come in.
And you can't change anything?
No, not really.
Not here?
No, not here, but you look at, you would hope that it's been in here since 2012, I think. You go, okay, hopefully they got something good. And honestly, the rig was great. I did a minimal amount of filtering on the PA when I looked at it. And it was
so what is the signal path then in between the PA and your Galileo? Is there anything else?
Most of the time, the guys they'll just hand me a drive snake, and they'll go straight to my Galileo, and I have options. Do you want it on stage? Do you want it in front of house? And a lot of times I don't see it, amps or processing or all that. You take a listen to it, and most of the time if it's good, you just go, yeah, great. And you work with what they give you.
Oh, so they have their own processing.
They have their own processing, yeah.
You didn't ever look at that? Cause
I didn't even get into it. I did talk to the systems engineer, because when I did come in and tune the room on Thursday, because I have a target curve I try to hit in my smart system. Mm-hmm. I saw some of the delay times weren't necessarily where I want them to be, because there's a couple front fills. There's a couple schools of thought on how you should do them. You can either put them in time with the PA, and then there's some people who believe that you could add 20 milliseconds to it to kind of make sure the image is not. It kind of focuses the image a little bit more, but I'm kind of the school of I want everything on one time plane.
Yeah, I've never quite understood misaligning the PA myself.
Yeah, I haven't either. And
intentionally.
I understand, or you know what it would explain to me, if you want to cut this, it was when you do add that, it tends to bring the image down and focused a little more, some people think. But I'm always, I'm not real big on separate.
Yeah, I've had conversations about that kind of stuff with other people.
Yeah.
And that's always how you end it, the conversation, right? Some people think that.
Yeah,
I've never been able to measure it and prove it.
Yeah.
So I'd rather base my optimization process on things I can measure and prove.
Absolutely. I mean, I came from a company where they handed you a 58 and a DN360, and you just talked into it, and you just carved it up, and that's how you EQ'd a PA. And I mean, we're talking a PA with 8 sends to 8 zones, left, right, center, sub, balcony, under balcony, lawn. I just remember the big tours would come in there, and you started to see the Sims and the early JBL Smarts and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, there's something going on there. And I mean, we weren't completely just like, hey man, just plug in that mic and make it happen. We had a DN60 Clark Technic spectrum analyzer, and we had an IV you could walk around with, and that was pretty wild. But then when you actually get into physics of time arrival and phase coherency, all of a sudden, all this corrective EQ you were doing, once everything is phase aligned, you're like, oh wow, all that EQ that I used to have to put into the EQ for a 58 at a graduation, it's gone. You literally put the high pass filter on, turn the mic up, and it sounds better than if you'd spent 3 hours trying to make it sound like that.
Well, so let's wrap up talking about how you handle your front fills. So where do you place the microphone?
I run 4 mics.
So when you are, so tell me your process then for tuning the front fills themselves.
Tuning the front fills themselves.
I guess level and delay. Where do you
level and delay? Yeah. Well, what I normally, we can run through the whole process real quick because
let's do it.
I've optimized it because in rock and roll where we do a 10 a.m. load in, and I have lighting guys who need to focus lights, and I have backline guys who need to check instruments, and I need 20 minutes of silence just to kind of do it. I run 4 mics, Audix, TM1s. Audix is literally down the street from my house.
Oh, cool.
Cliff Castle, great guy. So I have a mic on the back of my console, right where my ears would be. I have like a taper mic stand, we would call it. So about a 12 to 15 foot tall stand with my XY pair for recording, and then there's another TM1 up top just to get what's happening above. I stole this from Jeremy, who mixes Lifehouse. I saw him do this, and I run a 2-pair to a mic stand, and then about head height, I have a TM1, and then on the bottom, on the same stand, I have a ground plane. And I usually...
Where does that go?
Usually, I try to go 25 feet back from stage, off access. Always.
And so your front of house position is something like 50 feet from stage or 100 feet?
Normally, like today, it's about 100. I mean, I always can tell from the delay in the delay locator and Smart. So I think I'm about 100 feet back today. But it could be anywhere from 75 feet to 125 feet. I mean, I carry a 330-foot snake.
Oh, well.
European soccer stadium standard,
So 4 mics, 1 in front of house, head height, 1 in front of house.
Way up. Yeah.
And that is does that kind of cover your thinking that way I don't have to run one up to the balcony?
I will run one up to the balcony.
Okay.
I will, depending if there's a separate balcony system. Because remember,
So tell me about this one you have way up. What is that telling you?
You know what? I honestly... I copied it off one of the guys I looked up to my entire life. They always had it up on a stand like that, and I just went, sure.
Cool. All right.
So...
And then the other one that you have that roves around, that has like 1 head height and 1 ground plane.
1 ground plane.
That's cool. So that kind of speeds things up. 1 mic stand.
1 mic stand and move it around. So how I normally do it is I start with the ground plane. I put pink noise up on one side of the PA and hit the delay locator on all my mics.
So you're listening to one side, the whole array, but just the main array.
Just the main array. And that I set as my 0 time. And I look and see what my 0 time is there. And then I look around to see if anything else is further back than that. And then normally what I do from there is...
You mean on the stage?
Well, not the stage so much as like if, let's say, if the front fills are back further, or if there's a center fill that's back further, then... and most of the time I'll ask the house guy if I'm using, hey, what's your 0 point here? Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of times...
You want to know what the latest arrival is.
The latest arrival is. And, 99% of the time it's the main array. So what I do is I look, and I can tell you how exactly I did it here, because when I came in, I looked at the main array, and it was great. And then what I did was I pulled up the sub, and I looked at the phase between the mains and the subs, because I've found out when you do the aux-driven sub on a profile, and then you have a plethora of plugins on your left-right bus, and nothing on your sub bus, you're changing arrival times because one's going through a whole line of plugins and the other one's literally just going to the PA. So I have a time correction plugin right there that just lines them up.
Wait, why wouldn't you do it in the Galileo?
I do it in the Galileo too.
Oh, okay.
So I did it in the Galileo for a long time, but just to get me even closer to make it quicker, it was like if I looked in Smart this winter when we were home of like, here's my arrival time out of my left-right Galileo, here's my sub time, not through speakers, just the actual outputs. And I lined them.
You're correcting that initial delay just out of the console.
Just out of it, so we know that it's there. So I came in, I looked, and the subs were fine. I think I put a couple milliseconds on just to really make them overlay really nice.
And are you looking at all the subs at once or just one of them?
Normally I try to look at the one side.
Okay.
The subs here, there's so many of them. The older I get, the
And
more...
are they left-right stacks under the main arrays?
Left-right stacks,
Okay.
double 18s, 4 high. So there's a huge summing under the balcony where I'm sitting, and then in the center there's a definite power alley. When I looked at the front fills, I noticed that they were way far behind. And
This is all the same mic position.
all the same mic position.
Got it. So you're 25 feet back into
so
the
it's
room.
looking at
on
the
axis
PA
with one of the arrays.
with one of the arrays, and I looked at one of the front fills and the main array, and then I had talked to the house engineer. I said, "Hey, do you have a delay on your front fills?" And he went, "Yeah, I have about 20 something milliseconds." And I said, "Can you just bypass it?" And as soon as it bypassed, it lined right up to what I had.
Cool.
So he actually had pulled them back 20 milliseconds. I walked down with my tablet and listened to where they feel right, because I don't want them overpowering, because there's been a few times where the front fills are
Your
too
tablet's
loud.
controlling your Galileo?
Galileo.
Okay.
So I do on my level control. Pretty much I use my Galileo as my master fader.
How do you do that? So you have like compass on an iPad or something?
No, I have a old X61 IBM ThinkPad.
Okay.
And I just run around with that, and that way,
got it.
you know, I love smart, and I get it to where it hits my target curve, but once it's done, I listen to the virtual sound check and hear if it sounds like my show. And sometimes smart will tell you to pull this much EQ out, and you wind up putting some of the back in just to warm it up a little bit. So
Is that the next step then? So you looked at the relationship between the main array and the sub, then you looked at main array and front fill, and then are you looking at combined systems for EQ?
the last one, of course, is everything together. So on the Galileo, of course, you have parametric and graphic on the input channels, and then you have all your individual output, your 10-band parametrics on the outputs. So what I'll do is I'll individually EQ the systems, one side, look at the other side, match the EQ to the other
I see.
side.
So before you look at combined systems,
Yeah.
when you're still looking at solo systems, you're doing an EQ step there.
Yeah, and then I'm looking at what the EQ is culminating after you individually EQ the system. And I tend not to tune flat. I tried for a long time to do that flat.
Oh, so yeah, you said you have a target curve.
It's like a 6 dB slope from low to high, you know, where
Okay.
it tapers down. It seems to be the most musical curve. And then with this band, since we have a lot of acoustic guitars, I tend to kind of around 160, 125, kind of pull a little bit more there, just because the acoustics will build up there.
Tell me just about, this is a smart specific question. How did you create a saved trace that is your target trace to look at in the transfer function?
One of these multiple shows that I did in a theater that I really enjoyed.
found something you liked,
I
you
found
saved
something I liked, and at the end of the night, or at the end of the show, when the theater loaded out, I brought Pink Noise back up and took a snapshot of it.
Nice.
And normally I look at that and I go, okay, that's about, and it's never perfect. It's normally like where it needs to sit, where it's
Right.
not going to be too bright or too bitey in the mid-range. Or,
Right, and different speaker systems are,
Absolutely.
even if they have the exact same response,
Yeah.
might not have the same all-around qualities. You still have to do more work.
No, how does the horn in that box react with the driver on its back as compared to what this box does, and the relationship of components in the box? How do they work with one another? Because also at the same time, you could tune a box at a lower level, but as soon as you bring it up to a louder volume, it could literally almost change the characteristic of the box a little bit, and the tuning.
So you talked about how you use your microphone on stands, and you're looking at a ground plane measurement. When do you start incorporating your front of house microphone?
I love, in the last couple versions of Smart, the averaging.
Live averaging?
I love it.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, your coherency line, when you look at individual mics, where you're like, oh, okay, the mid-range there, I'm not getting the best reading. For some reason, when you add 4 mics in and an average, most of the time I leave the ground plane out, because that's got just one function normally. But with the 3 mics that are kind of head level and above, the coherency just really cleans up, and so you're getting really good data that you're looking at.
So this is when you switch to looking at the entire system.
Looking at the
together,
entire
combined
system,
systems.
yeah.
You'll have on all 4 traces at the same, all 4 transfer function measurements plus a live average?
Usually 3 and an average, yeah.
Cool.
Because if I have one mid-house and I have one down front and then I have one in the back, which I've done that a lot too, you can see what the system is doing. And you can also look at the volume, because I also calibrate my mics to look at dB to see what the slope is. Like a theater like this, since I'm under a balcony, there's an 8 to 10 dB slope, or 8 to 10 dB between what the reading is down front and what I'm hearing in the back.
Wow.
Where it could be 97 dB in the first few rows, it's 90 dB back where I am under the balcony, especially when people stand up.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Can you, before I forget, will you share your target trace with me so I can share it with other people?
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the show notes.
Yeah.
It's always fun. People like to see, what other targets people are working with. During the show, do you ever go back and look at the last combined systems trace you stored at front of house? Basically, my question is, do you continue looking at a transfer function during the show?
I have the transfer function up. But more or less by that point, I look at the RTA. Yeah. I'd set to 1/3, just because 1/3 is what the old analyzers used to be, and I really don't need anything that's surgical. And it's set relatively fast, but kind of on an average. And it's more or less just a look. I like to see if anything's building up that in the heat of mixing the show, because there's so much going on, that I'm just missing. Oh wow, that 160 seems to be building up. And it's a really great tool to look over real quick and go, okay, there it is, and just grab it fast, where I don't really want to be surgical with the EQ, I wanted to be musical more than surgical. Yeah. 54 lines from stage on this tour. They all come down. The Avid rack is on stage, and then I have 8 channels of Midas XL48 inserted via AES, and they come down analog lines. So I have a 20 channel analog snake. I have 4 AES lines, and then I have a 240 volt L1430 power cable.
Okay.
That's the snake, and so everything comes into the console.
Tell me about how you like those inputs laid out. Is it pretty traditional, or?
Traditional for the most part, but I love the fact on the Avid is if you have to add another drum channel down at the end, you can move it into your drum lineup. I'm the typical kick, snare, hat, toms, percussion, bass, keys, guitars, vocals, it's all in blocks, and it's more or less set up in groups on my console with blank channels in between for the players. And then the same thing I do with the VCAs is every player has a VCA, and then at the end I do a overall vocal VCA and an overall band VCA. Okay. Which Tony Blanc taught to me years ago. And it's just a good way to always, if you need to push the vocals over the top of the band, or if you want to pull the vocals back to let the band really vamp out or something like that, it's just a really good way. I'm a huge subgroup guy, so everything subgroups down.
People are always saying that about you. He's a huge subgroup guy.
Yeah, I'm a huge subgroup guy. No, and sometimes I'll set up a festival scene. I mixed the Portland Blues Festival this summer, and I did my normal profile, start file, which is subgrouped out. And some engineers went, just don't do that. I'm like, well, great, you can
leave them at 0. Don't worry about it.
Leave them what you want to do.
And you're doing some processing in those subgroups? Okay.
A lot of processing in the subgroups. Parallels on drums and vocals. So there's a drum comp channel that seems to get more kick, snare, hat, tom. No, not hats, just kick, snare, toms. Kind of the beefy things that kind of need that crush a little bit to push them through. And then another drum subgroup that's the entire kit. Bass has a group. Keys have a group. Electric guitars have a group. Acoustic guitars have a group. And then I have a parallel. They're all stereo groups. And then for also vocals. Kind of doing the same thing.
I should have asked when we were talking about the system, are you panning things in the show?
Absolutely.
Panning instruments? Okay.
Main vocals are right up one in center, because the whole process with this band is the 3 voices are one voice when they sing together. And there's a lot of snapshots where one guitar will go hard left or hard right, and things do move around. nice spread on the strings. I have 4 string players on this tour, and keyboard's pretty wide, overhead's pretty wide, because
if you're spreading keyboards, do you worry about me maybe missing part of the keyboard if I'm way over on one side?
Not too much with keyboards, and a lot of times, like when we're doing bigger places with side hangs, I'll do the reverse on the side hangs, so it'll be, instead of left right, it'll be right left. So you do that, so you reverse it, so there's a reverse stereo image on the sides.
So
and then
I still get to hear the whole instrument.
Yeah, you're gonna hear the whole instruments. The only time we ever do anything in this show, I mean, I'm not doing anything like really extreme, but there's a few songs that on the record things got panned left or right, where there's an acoustic that they're using as like a percussion instrument that might just go hard left for a few things. You worry about it a little bit, but the thing that you always got to remember is the vocal is the focus, especially with this show.
What's going on in some of these channels, and what are some pieces of the mix that you think maybe are unique or would be interesting to talk about, or other people might want to know about?
3 snare mics, 2 tops, 2 tops and a bottom.
2 tops. What's going on?
Telefunken M80, Sennheiser 914, and an Audio-Technica AE3000.
Okay.
The M80 is the typical 57 snare drum top. A couple years ago, I noticed I really liked the condenser on the bottom, really kind of bring out the brightness of the snare. And then I added the condenser. I'd seen a million people in the studio do it, and I move it around with some different acts. I do reggae acts sometimes, and I use it as a cross stick on the rim to get that really nice tick. But with this show, Chris will play brushes and stuff like that, and it also gives you a chance to I don't want every song to sound exactly the same. Like there's the snare
sound. So you're switching back and forth. You're not
they
combining
move
them
throughout the show. Every mic comes in and out, and the reverbs change a little bit, just so you're not just stuck with the drum sound for the entire show. If you listen to a record, not every song the drums sound the same. So yeah. And ribbons for overheads.
Oh wow!
That I started about a year ago. It's all bold, but it's amazing. It's for what we're doing with the show. It's amazing. I was typical vintage 414s forever. Went to these AEA and N8s, and just brilliant. Strings, 4 string players, 2 cellos, violin, viola, pickups.
Oh, okay.
We tried, and we do use sometimes the DPAs, which are amazing, but with the drummer sitting right there,
that's tough. I
wanted something clean. So I'm pretty good friends with the guys at Radio, and they've been great to me over the years, and I fully endorse and support their products. PZDIs.
Yep, I've heard about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was a little sterile in rehearsals. Jerry, our monitor engineer, said, hey, I wanted to kind of keep everything in the box, plugins and all that. So I went back after we did our rehearsals and kind of worked on the mix for about 2 weeks in my basement with my console, and wound up getting 4 Neve 511s from Jerry's recommendation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And used the silk function on them.
Okay.
And just all of a sudden the string sound is, people just are like, is that real? And
wow.
I'm like, yeah.
So let's back up for a second. So the deal with the PZDIs from Radial is the higher impedance.
Yeah, designed for piezo pickups.
And the silk function of the preamps.
Warmth. Just all of a sudden. I mean, I've mixed a lot of classical, Broadway, stuff like that, where I've had string instruments, and the first thing you always kind of did was kind of dull the stuff out a little bit, but we wanted kind of a ethereal, like like lush, like you want to swim away in the string sound, and I think we really accomplished that.
Okay.
Vocal mics are pretty standard. Brandi sings through a custom gold 105.
Nice.
Tim and Phil are on 935s, which I've loved since the first time Sennheiser kind of gave me a demo one, and I went, wow, this is a great vocal mic. Drums are pretty basic, 901, 902, the snare, 184s, hi-hat and ride, the ribbons for overheads, 421 on the floor tom, 904, all radial DIs on everything, except for the bass. The bass DI, I do 2 DIs on the bass. I do one pre-effects and one post-effects. The pre-effects is a radial J48. And Jerry, under his recommendation again, Boris, who owns a company called Sonic Farm out of Vancouver, Washington, brought me this DI box. And then I'll tell you about my other secret weapon. This DI box, he plugged it in, and by that point we kind of were done with rehearsals. I kind of dialed in my mix, and I went, we're, using an Avalon U5, and then this showed up, and I was like, just leave it. It was just stunning what this bass DI did. So
Really?
Yeah, we went to that.
Wait, what was your other secret weapon? Is that it?
No, the other secret weapon is called a Creamliner 3.
What's that?
It's a 1U unit. It's got transformers. It's got tubes. It's a 2-channel, almost like a saturation.
Okay.
And I don't know what it was. I wasn't particularly like interested in adding. Once again, I wanted to stay in the box. So now I've got a rack of Neve 511s. I've got outboard reverbs for the main vocals, and then this box showed up.
Outboard reverbs.
Yeah, outboard reverbs.
All right.
Creamliner box showed up, and it's a 2-channel master bus processor that's supposed to help.
I love how you say that, like it just by itself, mysteriously. You don't know where it came from.
Well, no, he showed up at the Commodore Ballroom, and I put it in line during sound check, and I went, oh great, just take my money now.
Oh my God. Wow.
And it literally just it made a profile, which we all know how a profile sounds, all of a sudden sound like no other profile I've ever heard before. It had warmth and depth, and just it worked so well for what the sound of this record and this tour needed to sound like, and I'm sold on it 100%.
Talking to Robert Scoville, he was telling me about a giant, super heavy transformer that he carries around with him in his rack, and his tech really doesn't like because it's so heavy. So it sounds like similar situation, like something that he inserts across the master bus that he feels like he can't live without, but yours is just a lot lighter.
It's a heavy unit. I mean, I have an 8-space rack up there that's full of some really nice stuff. But yeah, it's a really great piece, man. I can't speak. It's Sonic Farms. They're out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and I just highly recommend anything the guy makes. We're playing with one of the 500 series preamps in Brandi's studio right now, and it's just mind-blowing what this guy makes.
So you've got to go. If anyone wants to follow your work and the stuff that you're doing, do you have a place to do that online?
Facebook, Sean Quackenbush, and then Instagram is FOH Quack.
Cool.
Reach out to me. I geek out, and I'll talk for hours about this stuff.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining me on Sound Design Live.
Thanks for having me, man. Big fan.
Sound design. I want to thank Rudolf Smetana for the music in today's episode. You can find more of his music over at soundcloud.com/ruderuda-1. That's RUDERUDA-1, the number 1. Sound Design Live is supported by Bob, Chris, Dave, DC Sound Op, Ellis, Senqui, Joel, Kuba, Learn Stage Lighting, Martin, Michael, Nicholas, and Roadie Free Radio. You can start supporting Sound Design Live today for as little as $1 over at patreon.com/sounddesignlive.